I work at a retail store and I detest my job with all my heart. And because I was a dumb shit and said I'm always available, they routinely fuck me over and put me at nights. But I whine and bitch and moan and digress. I'm okay working nights since I get to see my boyfriend when he picks me up. Boyfriend usually gets off at 10:30 p.m. but he doesn't leave until around 11, so most nights I'd have to wait for him. On top of that, he has to make a 10-minute drive, so I'd have to wait an hour and 40 to 45 minutes, which didn't bother me. He'd call to tell me he was coming and make sure I was still alive. Earlier in the week, an Uber driver kept asking me if I was someone named Lenore. I told him no and he did it again, but this time he kept asking if I was sure. How the fuck am I not gonna be sure of my name? Fortunately, my boyfriend pulled in and honked at me, causing the Uber creep to speed away. I'm a paranoid penny, so this made me wonder if he'd been watching me and knew my boyfriend always came late. And then I tweaked out since I keep getting these weird phone calls from some telemarketing agency, but when I answer, no one is there and they hang up. Is it connected? Is the government watching me? Do I have 7 days left to live? Fast forward 3 days later. I'm standing there listening to music, waiting for him to call me and pick me up. He finally does and starts cracking a joke about how he's glad Creepy Uber didn't answer. As we start shooting the shit and joking, this Indian woman comes up to me. I don't hear her at first since I have noise-canceling headphones. She gets closer and keeps calling to me. Finally she yells, "Hey!" I look over at her and smile and go back to talking to my boyfriend. She does it again and I excuse myself. "Hi, can I help you?" "Do you need a ride?" She asks me and looks. Nice enough, but something just didn't settle with me. Her car is parked at the stop sign and there's someone else in it. "No, my friend is coming for me, thank you." I notice that there's a man in the driver's seat and that she isn't wearing a uniform from either of the stores near us. She begins to ask again, "Are you sure? I can give you a ride. Do you need a ride? Get in. Do you need a ride?" I begin to feel a little uncomfortable and my preschool don't get in a stranger's car training kicks in, so I politely decline and go back to talking to my boyfriend. "So, are you close?" "Just pulled out. I'll get there. Just stay on the line." "Is that woman gone?" No, she wasn't gone. In fact, she was standing 6 feet away watching me, and she looked annoyed. I told him in code that no, she hasn't left. She has in fact remained there leaning on the car just watching me, and she is looking angrier with each passing second. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the man tell her something and she looks right at me and begins interrogating me. "Friend not here, do you need a ride?" "Where friend? He probably forgot you." "That's okay, we give ride. It's cold." "Get in, tell us where you live, we drop you off." "Do you need ride?" At this point she begins to get closer to me. I try to avoid her by moving to the farther end of the plaza strip. "Honey? Yeah, so about my sister, well, she's gotten closer, but I'm pretty scared she's too far away from home. Something might happen. Hurry so I can tell you." I say in code as the car drives up. Now she looks pissed. "Get in the car now. We give you ride. Get in now." At this point she opens the car and begins trying to get me inside, pulling me and yanking on my jacket. She's a taller and bigger woman, so she tries to pick me up. At this point I'm about to shit myself and I'm screaming and kicking and wiggling. Meanwhile I can hear him yelling at me that he's coming and that he's calling the police. Now my mind is running 1,000 miles an hour and I'm panicking, thinking that I'm gonna get raped or be some kind of weird present for her husband, since he looks pretty content with her effort to kidnap me. "Get in, shut up, I will hit you. You need ride, be quiet, you come with us. You want to see our house? Very nice, you need ride." I start to cry as she manages to get my torso in the car. My right hand is locked on my phone and she begins trying to take it, and my boyfriend is panicking, telling me the police are sending an officer. She shoves my face into her leather seat. Now my airway is obstructed and she's not letting me go. She's bigger and stronger than me and she knows it. Her whole weight is on me. I try not to panic so I don't black out from lack of oxygen, and all of a sudden I start getting mad as shit. Her husband says something in another language and she lifts one hand up and leans down trying to get something from the front. I immediately use the arms I'd been using to push myself off the seat to stab her stomach. She recoils, letting go of me a little, and I headbutted her, tossing my melon back as I scream, fear-stricken and filled with adrenaline. "That's my purse. I don't know you." Finally, my boyfriend pulls in. I bolt to his car as the Indian woman is sitting on the ground. After I shut the door, he speeds off towards his house. When we get inside, I break down, babbling about how scared and terrifying it all was and how if I hadn't had the opportunity, she might have taken me to her house and done God knows what. After this incident, the police officer they dispatched got there about 20 minutes after and didn't find anyone. My boyfriend talked to his boss and was granted the ability to leave early for me. I'm still weirded out by cars stalling in the plaza. This happened over a year ago and it still bothers me. I work in a department store and have to deal with drunk customers before staggering around the store and even trying to start pillow fights with me. But there was this one guy who terrified me. I'll start this by describing myself. I'm around 5'11" and kinda chubby, but by no means fat. I'm a little big and not easily intimidated by most people. My hair is red, but my bangs and 2 streaks of my hair are a green teal color. On this day in particular, I wasn't wearing a full face of makeup. Honestly, I think all I had time to do was some eyeliner, and I've got the unfortunate baby face. So this guy, I'd say about 6'2", walks up to me and asks if I can help him. He's got a slight accent, but I can't even place it. Kinda like an English accent, but it was just off. He's got grayish white hair and a goatee. I'm not that great with age guessing, but he was at least old enough to be my dad, if not my grandpa. He's also what I'd describe as husky. A little fat, but overall just generally big. At least twice my size. He's also wearing a thick coat, but it was an unseasonably warm and sunny day without a cloud in sight. He starts asking me about men's clothing, but he's talking under his breath, so it's hard to hear. So I lean in to hear him a little better. I think he's just asking where that department is, so I proceed to point him in the direction of the men's department. Then I hear him mumble something else. This time about young men's, sounding displeased. "Oh, if you're looking for young men's, that's in the front corner of the..." He cut me off mid-sentence and his whole demeanor changed. He raised his voice. "What? Do I look like a young man to you? What are you, like 15? Then I watch as his eyes scan me up and down, almost as though he were checking me out. As if that outburst hadn't even happened, he starts calmly mumbling again, and I can't quite make out what he's saying. All I hear is that he's talking about my hair. It was like he was thinking out loud, but didn't realize it. Then he says he has to use the bathroom, but once he's done, he wants me to help him find a dress shirt and that he wants it to match my hair. I politely say okay and give him a fake laugh and smile, not knowing what else to do. As soon as he starts to walk away, I bolt to the other end of the store. I was panicking already because that encounter was just uncomfortable, so I'm trying to avoid him when a couple asks for my help. So I'm helping this couple and they of course drag me back down to the end of the store where this guy is still waiting. In that time, one of my coworkers had the pleasure of talking to him for a moment, but he told her he didn't need any help. He was just standing there. So I'm helping the couple still and I walk past him and he kinda shouts at me in an angry tone. It was quiet enough but also too loud to be mistaken for a normal indoor voice. He said something along the lines of why was I ignoring him even though I had agreed to help him. That's when I really noticed his size and the way he shifted his body as he took a step towards me. I felt like he was threatening me and I knew if he lunged I wouldn't stand a chance. I tell him I wasn't ignoring him and I was just helping someone else. I hand off the item the couple was looking for and direct my attention to him as he is waiting less than 5 feet behind me. I honestly didn't know what else to do. My body screamed run, but my head said that if you do, something bad is going to happen. He told me he had already looked at shirts and didn't find what he wanted. So then he asks if I'll walk him to the front doors. Alarm bells are going off in my head. I don't want to get too close to the doors with this guy because who knows if he will grab me and drag me out into a waiting car or something. My heart was racing, but then I thought, my manager is in the front of the store at the jewelry counter, and if I walk the guy there, I'll still be safe. He will be able to see the exit from there, but he won't be close enough to be able to kidnap me easily. So I walk up with him and we're walking next to the bras and the aisles are kinda small. I realize he keeps trying to walk next to me. but the aisles are way too small for him to walk next to me without us touching. So we are weaving in and out of the fixtures in the center aisle, me trying to avoid him and him trying to stand next to me. He then starts to laugh. He mumbles some more, something about that it's funny that we're weaving in and out of the aisles. I'm thinking this is not funny at all. He proceeds to ask me why I dyed my hair. I look at him and say, I don't know because I felt like it, I guess. Then he asks how old I think he is. I reply with an I don't know. He then asks me again about 5 seconds later. I repeat I don't know. He doesn't even tell me how old he is and he tries to ask personal questions. He asks my middle name. I pause. The look he gave me was of pure frustration, so I gave him my middle name. He repeated my first and middle name back. I shuddered. My mom says it when she's mad, but him saying it actually scared me worse. We finally reach the front of the store. He asks me to take off my glasses. I slip them down for a second, not even uncovering my eyes, and push them back up real quick. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do. My training never covered this sort of a situation. I was terrified of what he might do should I refuse him. My instinct was telling me to oblige, so as long as what he asked was somewhat harmless. After I did that, he says, "Ah, yes, your eyes are as beautiful as I thought they'd be." I'm confused. Is he hitting on me? Didn't he just say I looked 15? What the fuck? We get to the front of the store and then he asks me if I knew why he wanted me to walk him to the front of the store. I honestly tell him I don't know. He starts giggling to himself like a schoolgirl. If you've never heard a grown man giggle, well, let me just tell you, it's unsettling. He says, "Oh, you probably just think I'm a crazy old man." In my head, I'm screaming, "Yes, now get the fuck away from me." But I feel if I say yes, he's going to hurt me. Then he says, "I wanted you to walk me to the front because I just wanted to spend a little more time with you." I'm standing there like I don't even know this guy. This guy doesn't even know me. Why does he want to spend more time with me? I want to get away from him. My manager walks by and I shoot her the most horrified look, and she just smiles and waves, completely oblivious. Then he follows that up with, "You know, sometimes the Lord just brings people together." He reaches into his jacket and grabs a hold of something. Then he quickly adds, "And sometimes he takes them away." He still had a hold of whatever was in his jacket. My heart sinks and I'm thinking, this is it. He's got a knife or a gun. He's going to murder me and drag my body out and stuff it in his trunk. He follows that up with another, "You probably think I'm a crazy old man." I pause to think on that and I respond with a seemingly thought out, "No, not really." He then lets go of whatever he had a hold of in his coat and draws his hand back out. He looks at me intently, then after several seconds of awkward staring, he says, "And now I'm going to leave and probably never see you again." I'm like, thank fucking God. He turns to leave but whips his head back around and says, "But if I do happen to come back, don't call security on me." As soon as he walked around to walk out the door, I ran to the back office to hide. My legs felt like jello, but I kept moving as if my life depended on it. I was then escorted to the back of the store to wait until they could confirm that he was indeed gone from the store. I waited for about a half hour before I went back out to finish my shift. When my shift ended, I waited around a half hour more so I would be able to walk out with someone else. The woman I walked out with had also encountered him by the register while I was hiding on the other end of the store. She proceeded to tell me that she thinks he was drunk. I'm still currently working at that same place and I haven't seen him since, and I hope I never do again. I was around 6 months pregnant and working at a retail store in a large mall. Our store was a corporate store, so there was some really heavy traffic through it. During some downtime, I told my coworkers I was taking a bathroom break. Unfortunately, the restrooms were on the second floor of our store towards the back in the furniture section, which was hardly ever busy. I worked in the women's section in the bottom floor right near the door that entered the mall itself. I rushed into the restroom because, holy crap, this baby is crushing my bladder. Instantly, I felt like something was wrong. Nobody was in the restroom as far as I could see. No feet in the stalls and no one coming in or out. There were no other restrooms nearby, so I brushed it off and did my business. The entire time I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I didn't even bother to check my phone. Something was wrong. As quickly as I could, I washed my hands and dried them. The entire time I was standing at the mirrors near the sink, I felt as if someone was watching me. Now, at this point, I had been working at this store for over a year. Never before had I felt so off. I left and went back downstairs to the section I worked in. When I arrived, I heard over the walkie-talkie that there was an accident in the women's restroom. I felt uncomfortable but went back to work as usual. Later, my coworker told me what happened. My manager, a tiny sweet Pakistani woman, went into the women's restroom. She was alone. As she went to wash her hands, a man rushed out from another bathroom stall straight towards her. Thankfully, she had her walkie-talkie on her and immediately called for help. The guy panicked, ran out of the women's restroom, through the store, and out into the mall. As far as I am aware, he was never caught. It sends chills down my spine that while I was in the restroom, this guy was hiding in there. I'm guessing that he saw I was pregnant and decided not to attempt to assault me. I'm so thankful that he didn't harm my manager or anyone else, but it's really creepy nonetheless. I work in an outdoor mall in a great neighborhood. You assume that it's safe as hell to be there, but then again, you just can't be sure anymore. There are creepy people everywhere, and I just can't help shake the feeling that this isn't my last encounter with this man. I'm 19 years old and work at a kiosk that sells all kinds of wonky jewelry. It's usually teens, young adults, and occasionally some older adults that shop with us. Every once in a while, this man comes up to the kiosk, easily recognizable. Same leather jacket, crinkled corner of his eyes, one front tooth shorter than the other, same slouched way of walking. He's usually harmless, but oh my god, the last few times he's come by has made me so uncomfortable. I greet every customer with, "Hey, can I help you find anything?" And most of them just say they're looking. He always smiles at me and says, "Just looking, darling." At first it was fine. I didn't care whatsoever. He seemed like a harmless 50 or so year old man. He always spent a very long time looking at the display and never bought anything. Most of the time I'm working the night shift. At the kiosk, while I'm surrounded by other shoppers and other kiosk workers, mine is kind of all by itself in between two empty ones in the back, and I'm usually left alone minus the friendly security woman that stops and chats with me on her rounds. She comes by every 30 minutes or so, and she's one of the few friends that I have at work. The only stores in my view are a Reebok and a Macy's. A few nights ago, I was sitting at my kiosk bored out of my mind, and the security lady had already continued on her way. I had scrolled through Reddit already and was getting ready to open up Netflix and continue watching my show, when I hear footsteps coming up. I look up to see the creepy man staring at me, but not actually at the kiosk yet. I wave at him and he gives a little smile, but one that sends chills down my spine. A customer walks up and I immediately jump at the chance to help him, trying to shake the creepy feeling I had. After I had checked out the customer and had written down the receipt, I glanced up to see the man still staring at me. Before I could say anything, he started walking over, taking my eye contact as permission to come join me. "Good evening, darling," he said, doing an almost bow. "Good evening," I told him. He proceeded to do his usual checking the display but not buying anything. Instead of walking around the cart, he stayed by the register where I was. Walked behind my chair to check the sides but never went where he couldn't see me. Then he started asking questions like we were longtime friends. "So, darling, do you have a boyfriend?" I kind of guffed at that because I've been single for over a year now. I told him no, I didn't have a boyfriend, but there was a checkout girl I found pretty damn cute at my local grocery store. "I see," he said. "Do you have any plans after work?" he asked me. I was getting uneasy at this point, but I told him yes, I was going to a party. "You gonna hook up with any boys?" he asked. My jaw dropped. Whether or not I was hooking up with any boys was in no way any of his business, but I just told him no. He then smiled a little and said, "Good, you're too pretty for them little boys anyway." He faced me again and came up to hug me. Until this point, I hadn't realized that my heart rate was increasing, and it only became apparent after I found it harder to breathe. Before he actually said what he said, Linda, the security woman, walked up and glared at him. "Sir, if you're not going to be buying anything from this young woman, I suggest you go loiter somewhere else." He stiffened at the sound of Linda's voice and he left. "You okay, honey?" she asked me. I shrugged. "He's always here," I told her. She shook her head. "Let me and Russ walk you to your car after work today." I nodded, relieved that she offered without me having to ask. The rest of my shift is fine. I get through it and manage to make my bosses a bit of money. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Linda and her boyfriend Russ are at my kiosk. They wait for me to pack up my purse and then walk me to my little Prius. They wait for me to drive away as well. I'm on my way to the party. I stop by a gas station to fill up the tank. As I'm waiting for it to fill, I glance over and see the man from the mall at the mini mart. He's buying a pack of cigarettes and he looks out the window and sees me. When he does, he smiles and waves, holds up one finger asking me to wait a minute. I don't. I yank out the fuel hose and jump in my car, booking it out of there. I take several detours before arriving 30 minutes late to the party. I had to make sure I would lose him before showing up there. It's been a few nights since that happened, and the only reason I'm writing this now is because I'm actually working the morning shift, and I just saw him walk out of the store across from me. Linda has someone biking around this half of the mall, so he won't come near me today, but I'm still a little creeped out. I used to work retail. I know many of you shuddered at that sentence right there. Anyway, the store where I worked sold children's clothing. It was an okay job, but still had some interesting folks come in every once in a while. I was in my late teens to early 20s while I worked there. It was a busy Saturday and I was doing my best to keep the store tidy while helping customers. I was straightening a rack when this guy confronted me. He was tall, had a dark complexion and hair, and was wearing glasses. He looked about 30, give or take. He wasn't with anybody else and didn't appear to be shopping for a child. He struck up a conversation and was smiling and friendly the whole time. I don't recall what he was talking about exactly, but he kept following me around and not getting the hint that I was busy and uninterested. He then asked me if I had a boyfriend and I told him yes, but I can't remember if it was true at the time. He continued to hang around and told me I was pretty. He was making me uncomfortable and I wish he would leave me alone, but he wasn't really being rude and I was too polite to just tell him to go away. Then he told me he was from Egypt and that he wanted me to go there with him. He told me we'd have a great time and I'd love it there. I'd love it so much, in fact, that I'd want to live there. Alarms were going off in my mind. Like, who are you and why would I just take off halfway across the globe with you? I declined too politely and he left the store. I felt so relieved. Honestly, I was somewhat flattered but weirded out. I went about my shift and maybe an hour or two later, he returned. I was behind the counter ringing up customers and I'm very grateful that I was. He stood behind the people I was ringing up, interrupting whatever small talk we were making during the transaction and proceeded to beg me to come with him to Egypt. He had lost his smile and charm. Instead, he appeared desperate and impatient. I again told him no and was not nice about it this time. He left the store in a huff. I never saw him again, but I wish I had reported him to mall security or maybe even the police. I was naive at the time, but looking back, he was either a desperate weirdo or a human trafficker. Scary stuff, and I hope he didn't succeed with anyone else.
These encounters happened a few months ago and left me feeling so shaken. Here's some details just for background information. I briefly worked for a locally owned retail business that has 4 locations in the city I was living in. Most of the employees rotate between the 4 locations, and I was usually scheduled at the same one for most of my week, but would sporadically work at other locations. 2 of the stores are located inside of the buildings that contain shopping centers for other retailers and restaurants. These are the 2 stores that I have been working at during this experience. So it was mid-September, and I had about an hour left on my Saturday shift. A man came in, bought some things, and started conversing with me. I learned that he was a manager at another store within the same shopping center. He didn't seem threatening or creepy in any way, but he was a bit older than me. I'll call him Joe. He visited a couple of times over the next few weeks, and then one evening, after talking for a few minutes, he asked if I wanted to smoke a blunt with him after my shift. I told him I had plans to attend a party that night, but I didn't see anything wrong with smoking a blunt with him, so I did. After I closed the store, we met up, walked away from the building, and smoked a blunt. He asked if I wanted to grab a quick drink, and I'd agreed, but said just one, because I did have other plans. We got a drink, and then he used my phone to send a text message to himself so he could have my number. He seemed harmless enough, so I was okay with it. I thanked him for the drink and departed, not thinking too much of it. I had been careful about how much personal information I gave him. No full name, no description of where I lived, just that I lived in the south side of the city. For the next couple of Saturdays, he would stop in, buy something small, say hello when I was there. I didn't find this odd at all because he worked in the same building and I work at the same shop every Saturday. He would get a little too comfortable sitting by the counter, which made me a little uneasy sometimes, but he was never intimidating. If anything, he was just a bit annoying because he tried so hard to seem cool, telling me all about his partying lifestyle. I also found it odd when I found that he had friend requested me on Facebook. Maybe he looked it up with my phone number, but it still made me feel like he had invaded my privacy. Now fast forward a couple of weeks later. It was Saturday and I was working at a different location than usual. This store was also located in a small shopping center, but not the one I usually worked at on Saturdays. I was finishing up checking out a customer when someone else walked in the store and out of view behind a shelf. The first customer walked out and guess who came walking over to the counter? It was Joe. I said, "Wow, what are you doing here?" Not in an unfriendly tone, but like, what was he doing here? This led to the first encounter that made me genuinely uncomfortable. He ignored my question and immediately parked himself nearly behind the counter as if he worked there. This made me very uncomfortable because he was basically blocking me in behind the counter. To get out from behind the counter, I'd have to squeeze between him and a display case. He seemed to be playing dumb and said stuff like, "Wow, I didn't even know you guys had a store in here." Which I know was bullshit because he didn't work anywhere near this building. And I knew he wasn't just wandering around the city like, I wonder what stores are in here. He asked about how my week was, and I told him with as little detail as possible that I had been having a fun week going out with friends. He asked if I wanted to smoke again after this shift, and I said no thank you. I had things to do. Then he was asking what other kind of drugs I was into, and started to tell me all about his wild night with his crazy friends. I was extremely uninterested, but he didn't pick up on it and just kept going. I started to get more uncomfortable and thought about asking him to leave, but I didn't want to be rude since he hadn't really done anything threatening. I think that he had planned all of this out strategically. He had spent so much time trying to gain my trust in a way. He never acted predatory or out of line so that I would become more comfortable around him and allow him to get away with more creepy behaviors without saying anything. This is where it started to get weird. Again, he asked if I wanted to get high, and I reiterated that I didn't want to smoke because I had stuff to do later. He started asking if I liked uppers, if I'd ever tried speed. I haven't. And then admitted that he hadn't slept and was still high on speed from the night before. This put me so on edge, I didn't really know how to react. My anxiety was spiking, and I was starting to feel very panicky. He hinted again at the idea of us getting high together, and I was like, "Okay, what are you talking about? I told you I don't want to smoke." And he clarified that he wanted me to do speed with him, but if I did want to do it, I'd, quote, have to hang out with him for at least half an hour. At this point, I was so extremely uncomfortable I didn't know what to say. I was freezing up, hoping he would just go away. Oh, and for the record, I did not know up until after this encounter that speed was slang for meth. Otherwise, I would have told him to get the fuck out at that point. I told him I had never done speed and I didn't intend to. He reluctantly accepted, but didn't leave. He asked if there was an office in the back of the store, if there were cameras. There was, I pointed them out to him, and if we could go and do speed in the office. Again, I declined his offer and wished that he would leave. Finally, he decided to go and said that he would see me later. After he left, I was basically panicking because I kept realizing how fucking weird the whole thing was. How did he know where I was working that day? Maybe he went to my usual location and asked why I wasn't working there that Saturday? I asked a friend to meet me after my shift so I wouldn't have to leave alone and encounter him again. Thank God he didn't come back. But it made me so nervous I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder as I closed the store. I didn't want to tell my manager about it because I couldn't really tell her that I went and smoked weed with him after my shift. I felt so sick about the whole thing, but it didn't end there. Fast forward to the end of October. Joe had not made any more appearances. One Friday, I had a closing shift that was only a couple of hours in the late afternoon. I had rolled on Molly for the first time the night before, and I was feeling fairly fragile, for lack of a better term. Literally moments after I had settled in, guess who came waltzing in? My heart dropped. I was in no place to deal with him right now, and I had no idea what to do. I was so exhausted and out of it that I just didn't do anything. He stayed there for my entire shift, talking my ear off the whole time as I said nothing. And he even interacted with customers as if he worked there too. I wanted to cry the whole time. I felt powerless. I let him get this far and had no way to stop him from acting this way. A part of me was legitimately afraid to simply ask him to leave. I think he knew this. I was counting the minutes till the end of my shift. When it finally arrived, I was ready to run out of there. He followed me out of the building. He followed me to my bus stop. The entire time talking and talking and talking, bragging about his musician friends and his artist friends and how much crazy fun they would have at the raves. I would literally go 10 minutes without saying a word and he just wouldn't stop talking. I stood waiting for my bus, people all around us at the bus stop, and I just wanted to cry. He asked which bus I was taking, and I felt I had no choice but to tell him because he'd seen me getting on the bus anyway. He then casually mentioned that the bus I take goes past his friend's house. I prayed he wouldn't use that as an excuse to get on the bus with me, and frantically tried to think of a plan to stop that from happening. I texted my friend asking him to call me to pretend we were making plans. I spoke with him for a minute on the phone, and then hung up and told Joe that I was going to hang out with a bunch of my guy friends from high school, hoping that would deter him from following me further. It was another unbearable few minutes before my bus came, and I wanted to cry with relief when he didn't attempt to follow me on the bus. I ended up quitting the job for unrelated reasons, so I figured I would never see or hear from him again. He texted me a few weeks later, and I simply said, "Can you please stop talking to me?" He respectively agreed, and I blocked his number as well as his Facebook. I was surprised how easy it had been, but a few weeks later, I was at a museum with some friends that were visiting from out of town. We had a really great day, and had just entered the gift shop when my friends decided to go use the restroom. I waited around in the gift shop, idly playing with some souvenir rocks, when I looked up and saw something that made me do a double take. My blood ran cold when my fears were confirmed. It was Joe, here in the gift shop 5 feet away from me. He was with a child. His back was to me, so I ducked out of the gift shop and ran to the bathroom to tell my friends. I felt myself starting to get panicky. Just seeing him was beginning to become triggering for me. I couldn't believe he was here. We do not live in a very small city. The museum is an entirely different part of the city than where I had seen him before. I was terrified. I saw him walk out of the gift shop and continue walking into the opposite direction of us. I was sure he hadn't seen me. My friends and I went back into the gift shop to look around some more before leaving. The gift shop was a little bit crowded. I was looking at a display when I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I thought it was one of my friends. I turned around to see that it was Joe. He was saying excuse me, and I don't know if he meant it as in can I have your attention or can I get by you, but I felt as if I was going to throw up. We made eye contact and he smiled and I bolted through a crowd of people. I walked far away from the gift shop and waited for my friends to come back out, and we left quickly. I never saw Joe again after that. I hate thinking about it now because it gave me some serious anxiety to think what could have happened if I didn't have a bad feeling. If I had ever met up with him again, and if I decided to do more drugs with him, who knows what could have happened. It honestly chills me to this day just thinking about the fact that he may have been stalking me. If not, there were some insane coincidences that took place. So this is my story. I never heard from Joe again, and soon I moved out of that city. Joe, I hope we never, ever meet again.